The Human Sciences Research Council, in partnership with Eduardo Mondlane University, SATEM, and the University of Free State, has successfully hosted a second installment of the Climate Change and Futures in Africa Conference series. The conference, held over 2 days in Mozambique, discussed issues around disaster risk management, climate change, and early warning system. In addition, it also discussed the most pressing issues in disaster risk reduction, climate change, and research into early warning systems across the academic and practical disciplines. The conference assists local stakeholders, academia, researchers, practitioners, and other key stakeholders to gain new insight into sustainable disaster risk reduction and shared learning. And Chief Research Specialist in Developmental Cable and Ethical State Research Division of the Human Sciences Research Council, Dr. Wilfred Lunga, joins me on the news. Glad to have you join me, Dr. Lunga.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, can you just briefly provide an overview of the recently concluded climate change conference in Mozambique? I mean, what were the main objectives and the outcome of these conference?
Yes, thank you. The main objective actually of the conference was to bring about awareness on issues of early warning, and also issues of the other objective was just to share information among countries in the Southern Africa Development Community and also Africa-wide, as well as to start networking with other institutions in the region and working with the vulnerable groups. So those were the main objectives of the conference.
Mm. Okay, were there any notable findings or research shared, in this conference that highlighted specific challenges, for instance, faced by Africans in relation to climate change?
Yes, so quite a lot. Because of the vast number of people from different parts in the African continent and also other European countries, you'd find that gaps exist, especially in issues of information sharing. One major finding was that data is not available from those institutions which are tasked to deal with the disaster management issues. Also, the issue of getting the actual information to those people who are affected. You find most of the information shared is in scientific language. It's not broken down to the languages which are spoken at the local levels, especially vernacular dialects. So that on its own, it brings about a lot of challenges in that people don't understand what is it that they are supposed to be doing. So besides that, also, you find there is a disjuncture between the people who are supposed to be sharing information with those who are most vulnerable, who are mainly affected by disasters. So those are, in a nutshell, some of the issues which emerged during the conference.
Dr. Lunga, let's look at some of the major concerns, for instance, raised by researchers and experts regarding the impact of climate change, particularly on Africa. Do you have any specific regions or sectors discussed in detail?
Yes, we have specific regions. Our keynote speaker made a presentation where we found that in the African continent, the southern part, mostly countries like Mozambique, Malawi, Zimbabwe are really affected in a great deal with climate change, changing temperature, a lot of rainfall, a drought, and so forth. And those areas along valleys are also impacted. Low-lying areas, you'll find that when cyclones happen, especially in Mozambique, towns like Beira are submerged in water. Towns like Shai are submerged in water. So there's a lot which is needed to be done in terms of siting settlements and critical infrastructure in safe locations. Issues of enforcement when it comes to building also need to be taken into consideration. So those were some of the issues which were coming up but also people were highlighting that we should not ignore local languages, local knowledge within the area, because those who reside in those areas actually also have some solutions to deal with the hazards which they face on day-to-day basis.
Well, I must sincerely thank you for your time on the news, Dr. Wilfred Lunga from the Human Sciences Research Council. Thank you so much.
You are welcome. Thank you.
And South Africa's Home Affairs Minister, Motsoaledi, says the Border Management Authority Act must be reviewed to align it with the Immigration and Citizenship New Policy Framework. And this comes after the recently published white paper on citizenship, immigration and refugee protection was published. The draft policy aims to provide a framework to guide the granting of residency and citizenship to foreign nationals, as well as the protection of refugees and asylum seekers in South Africa. A research document by New South Institute reveals that, contrary to the belief that Africans have a propensity to migrate to destinations outside the continent, the average African emigrant is slightly more likely to migrate to another African country than to migrate outside the continent. And joining me on the news to talk about these is Michael Mutava, a research fellow at the New South Institute. Michael, good morning. Glad to have you join me on the news.
Good morning. Glad to be here.
Fantastic. In 2017, Ugandan President Yoweri Museveni said migration of people, if well managed, has been known to be the oldest remedy to poverty. So countries should stop, closing borders to new arrivals. What do you think are the actual advantages or disadvantages of migration in Africa?
Well, I want to say first that we're having a webinar on the 20th of this month to discuss the trends paper. The details will be on our social media and the New South Institute website. But I couldn't agree more with President Yoweri in terms of the advantages of migration. There's a clear nexus between free movement or migration and development. And this is well shown in our paper, because if you look at a country like Kenya, the main destination country for Kenya is Uganda, our neighbor. And according to 2021 data, Uganda is our largest trading partner. The value of exports of Kenya to Uganda is somewhere in the region of $800 million. That's by 2021 data. This is the same case down in South Africa. Zimbabwe and South Africa have a frosty relationship in terms of movement, but you cannot discount the amount of trade that happens between the two countries. South Africa exports, in excess of 3 billion worth of goods to Zimbabwe. That's by 2021 data also. The same will also be seen somewhere in Nigeria. Even though Cameroon is not part of ECOWAS, Cameroon is one of the biggest receiving countries for Nigerians. And there is a big amount of trade that happens between the two countries. I believe Nigeria exports something in the region of $500 million. So you can see there is a clear relationship in terms of free movement and development. Something else, we have what we call cross-border relationships. If you allow for free movement of people, you're going to have better cross-border and international relationships. Now, because DRC has been admitted into the EAC, the greater EAC now has a keen interest on the security of the DRC. So that shows you there is better relationship with free movement.
Mr. Mutava, apologies to cut in right there. Mr. Mutava, let's take a look at the Senegalese president's move. I'm talking about Macky Sall, who has ordered emergency measures to be taken to halt growing number of migrants leaving the West African country in small boats like we see them headed for Europe. He wants emigrants' departures neutralized. Is this a right call to make?
Definitely, it's not the right call to make. You cannot appear to legislate on migration. What you must do is ensure that we have safe and legal pathways for migrants to use. If you look at the development of the EU through the Rome Statute in 1957, the document for free movement is called the Four Freedoms. So migration is more like a right, And in 1986, they accommodated that right in the European Charter of Human Rights. So migration should be treated as a right. You cannot appear to neutralize it. You should only encourage it, not appear to neutralize it. And then migration has an agency of itself. You don't try it has a mind of itself. So you can't appear now to tell people that you can't move. If they find there is an incentive to move, they will move.